Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, now, the claims are shocking. Rape, bestiality, child sexual abuse, and even more shocking, they're allegations against the United Nations peacekeepers, amongst others. UN officials are now investigating the reports involving troops and staff in the Central African Republic between 2013 and last week. In a moment, we'll be speaking with the UN envoy there, but first, here's our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson.
They had fled here in terror in their tens of thousands. The airport in the country's capital, Bangui, becoming a vast tented camp where families felt safe. Safe from the guns and machetes of the warring factions. Safe because there were UN peacekeepers and French soldiers here, weren't there? They'd protect them, wouldn't they?
What we typically see here at the Mpoko camp is the head of a household who has nothing, not even enough resources to feed his family, and then a child, a minor, who thinks they're only taking a walk and then is tempted by a soldier offering him either a water bottle or a can of food or something else we call war bread, which results in this child being violated. This is serious. Have they come here to help us or destroy us?
An international scandal now envelops the UN peacekeeping operations and the separate French one too. 3 Congolese soldiers on trial back in their country accused of rape. There are many others. In the US Senate, this.
If I knew that the UN was sending peacekeepers into my neighborhood, I would leave here immediately. I would drop what I was doing. I would catch the next flight home, and I would go home and try to protect my family from the abuse that they put forth on the very people that they try to protect.
Over 100 people from the Central African Republic are now testifying to sexual abuse. Just last week, an advocacy group in the country passed to the UN a dossier alleging that a French commander had forced 4 girls to have sex with a dog. French authorities have started a new investigation. Month after month of condemnation, and still it goes on.
It's not surprising to me that these crimes continue to take place, given that the people claiming to have zero tolerance, in fact, have 100% tolerance. There's actually no actual implementation of these lofty statements.
The UN now has more than 108 new complaints about sexual abuse of young women and children against men whose job it is to protect the people of the Central African Republic. But the UN has no powers to convict. That is down to the countries who sent their own soldiers to the country in the first place. We don't yet know if that's a route to justice or to a cover-up.
Alex Thompson, who himself was reporting in the CAR at the time of some of these things happened. Well, just before we came on air, I spoke with Diane Corner, deputy head of the UN mission in the Central African Republic, who's in Bangui. I asked how this could all have been allowed to happen.
We have troops who were operating in very difficult circumstances and had not, and some of them have been in theatre for 2 years by the time they came and joined MINUSCA.
I mean, some of this behaviour is so depraved. I mean, bestiality and worse. It seems that they've completely lost their humanitarian coordinates. And this must have happened as a result of either lack of supervision or, frankly, being in the field far too long to have got to this situation.
Well, if I can just address that particular point about bestiality, that actually doesn't relate to UN forces. It relates to other international forces here.
With the greatest respect, you're kind of saying, look, it's OK now, let's draw a veil over what happened before. Surely the real thing is it happened, and this is utterly unacceptable, let alone in the United Nations. It's an appalling scar on the reputation of peacekeeping.
Yeah, it is absolutely unacceptable, and that is why we are not drawing a veil under it. In fact, we are carrying out further research. I mean, as you say, fortunately, it is looking as if the rate of the number of abuses, it's gone down this year because of action that's been taken, very firm action that's been taken. And so we, at the moment, only have 4 cases which we know have been committed in 2016. That, however, we're not being at all complacent about that. But we're also not going to draw a veil over what has happened in the past, because the organisation needs to learn from mistakes that were made, and also because we have a duty to the victims.
If this information hadn't been leaked, we'd never have known about it anyway.
I don't think that is true. Within the UN system, we have been transparent about this. We've been adopting a policy of transparency since the middle of last year, of actually talking about these cases openly and saying when we've had cases, because we believe that transparency is the best way of dealing with this. That doesn't mean to say that we're going to release every single detail of what's going on, and you wouldn't expect us to.
Of course, the United Nations itself cannot prosecute these people. They have to be prosecuted by the countries from which they've come. Are you satisfied they will be prosecuted by the countries from which they came? And if they're not prosecuted, what can be done about it?
Well, I mean, you're right. That is the system that the General Assembly of the United Nations, the country members of the United Nations are insisting on, that it is the countries that retain the sovereign right to prosecute their own troops. I think much more pressure needs to be brought to bear on member states, on troop contributing countries, to make sure that prosecutions do take place. And there are some signs of progress on this. For example, we've just had a recent trial of 10 soldiers accused of abuses in the Central African Republic, opening in the DRC in Kinshasa, and that's an encouraging sign.
Dan Corner of the UN speaking to John earlier.